has served here. He is an excellent clinician, interventional cardiologist, scientist, and innovator. He developed the indigenous platinum iridium coronary stents and has been instrumental in clinically evaluating Indian stents. The cost of Indian stents is now going to be reduced considerably, and on that he has worked very hard. More recently, he has been involved in the development of indigenous nanocarbon-coated drug-eluting stents. He set up the Center for Excellence for Stem Cell Studies at the AIMS, which has initiated treatment of patients with dilated cardiomyopathy for the first time in the world. This has benefited a large number of no-option patients who are waiting on the cardiac transplant list. He is leading the largest study on the use of stem cells in heart attack patients. More recently, he has set up the Biodesign Center at the AIMS in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Technology and famous Stanford University, which is very rare. This is an international fellowship on biomedical technology innovation, and this has led to a number of patents. The low-cost devices patented and developed at this center will benefit a very large number of people, and this is a remarkable development. In fact, a very stirring kind of development which gives new hope to the cardiac patients who consider that this heart treatment is very expensive and stent devices are not so readily available. He is a key person in the Affordable Healthcare Committee also of the DBI and the Wellcome Trust, which is a very, very unique distinction. He is currently developing the chest compression device, another device. Since he has gained a lot of experience, he is developing that for sudden cardiac death patients, funded by the Wellcome Trust. So the forum is open for you. Dr. Balram Bhargav, you please give your exposition on the subject.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you for the kind words. I think they were, I don't deserve that, and it's difficult to hide things in the public domain. So people are able to access a lot of things about everyone. That's the advantage and disadvantage. We had an excellent talk just now about portable hospitals and disaster management. I will talk briefly about what are the challenges that our country is facing in terms of healthcare innovation. Basically, I think pharma we've done phenomenally well. We are doing well. We don't need to worry about it in a big way. Pharma, we're pretty well established. Drugs are being exported from this country to several parts of the world. And I think that has been a great success story, which is well established. Vaccines, we are doing well. The other issue which we were worried about and what we were trying to get into for affordable healthcare is particularly medical devices and medical diagnostics. I think these are two areas which we really need to innovate in our country to cut the cost down, because we do have medical devices being developed in different parts of the world, but by the time they reach India, they are at a very high cost, and their affordability goes up tremendously. So that is one area, I think, where we need to work on it. But before that, I will talk about what are the challenges that our country is facing. I think we are aware of most of the things, but just to tell you that in India is a country of paradoxes. You have this Mumbai, which you can see during the day, Dharavi, and then you see this in India at night, the Marine Drive. So there is a great difference between the haves and the have-nots. And I think both have to readjust themselves. The have-nots and the haves have to readjust themselves so that they tend to meet at a certain point to avoid any conflict. So the issues which I'd bring to you at the moment are few uninspiring issues, but these are problems which are genuinely there. We have an increasing population in our country. We're still dealing with poverty and poor nutrition. Water sanitation is still a problem. The Ministry of Health, we heard about reverse osmosis plants and things being established. Our infant mortality rate is still one of the important markers for the health of a country. Don't speak very highly. We have an infant mortality rate of 58 in our country compared to 54 in Bangladesh and I think 28 in China. A lot of out-of-pocket expenditure is happening in our country, and much of the healthcare is being driven from the socialistic approach to the capitalistic approach. I think we have to have a balance in this kind of an approach, so that, I mean, insurance is there, but it is not picked up in a big way. The government is unable to provide fully, but it is struggling. And there is, as I mentioned, poor health insurance. The private sector is totally unregulated. I mean, they have no regulations. They can do what they feel like, and that is, again, contributing to the divide between the haves and have-nots in a big way. Some figures. The out-of-expenditure spending by the government is about 4%. The amount of per capita spending on health is about $98 international per year compared to more than 5,000 in the US. Out-of-pocket expenditure is more than 98% compared to about 25% in the US. And that still remains a huge, big problem, driving a lot of patients from rural areas who come to the cities, having sold their land, having sold their livestock, and are driven into poverty because of these situations, because of poor health. Again, the problem of doctors being limited in our country still is a huge, big problem. We are still having about 59 doctors per 100,000 population compared to about 200. I think there's 20 written in this slide, so it's about 200 in China compared to 549 in the US. So this is a huge, big problem, and the government is addressing it by starting a rural MBBS 3.5 years course. There are certain postgraduate incentives for people to work in villages, but that is happening, but gradually. As again, talking about the urban-rural divide, 70% of India's population is in rural areas, 80% of the doctors are in the urban areas, 75% of the dispensaries are in the urban areas, and 68% of the major hospitals are in urban areas. And then in the rural areas, there's low awareness, and again, poor infrastructure. Looking at this, what I feel is important, and we've been talking about innovation for the last 5-7 years. There have been several books written on it. People talk about it in a big way. And in fact, the Prime Minister at the Science Congress last year clearly stated that 2011 to 2020 is the decade of innovation for India. And in these 10 years, we have to innovate. And I said, for health sector, I would really say more in devices and diagnostics, really, and healthcare delivery. I think these are three areas where we really have to innovate, not copy-paste what is happening in the US or in the UK, but try to develop our own system. Again, it is very difficult to develop a system. It's very easy to try to get the system, but it may not be relevant. So that is what is the goal. Again, now these were some of the negative points I talked about our country. But the positives are the economy is growing. It's at about 7%, 8 to 9% expected. The affluent people are increasing. The middle class is increasing. The strivers are reducing. And we expect by 2013, the number of strivers from 131 million to go down to 93 million. The middle class or the aspirers from 46 million to 124 million. So the economy of India is changing from a pyramid-shaped economy to a diamond-shaped economy. And the annual healthcare spending is going to increase tremendously to the tune of about $200 billion by the year 2025. Now, what is the healthcare market? And I know in these two days of deliberations, a lot has been talked about it. But the healthcare services is 72%. And I'm concentrating more at the 3 o'clock position. If you look at devices and equipment, which is about 6%, and this is expected to grow. Pharma is, as I mentioned earlier, is already doing very well in our country. What are the drivers of this medical technology growth in our country? One is the disease pattern, which is changing. It is, as many epidemiologists write, that India is in a state of epidemiological transition. So there is the infective diseases have still not been overtaken, and the non-communicable diseases have come and are even in rural areas. Adoption of health insurance, still difficult, but is happening, and rising healthcare expenditure. So these are all the 3 or 4 issues which are driving the ecosystem of medical technology devices. The government is spending on healthcare. It is increased. At the present moment, is about 0.8 of the GDP, and the government is thinking of making it to 2% of the GDP. They're looking for programs, they're looking for ideas, they're looking for innovations, wherein this amount of money could be spent effectively. So that is an area which, if we just double our health expenditure, it should be utilized properly. That is an issue. Regulatory is developing in India, and as I mentioned, and I often feel that too much of regulation we don't need too much of regulation. We need discipline, yes, but regulation will kill innovation if it starts very early. So innovation has to be fostered with minimal regulation. Gradually, when innovation has taken place in a big way, then probably more regulatory influences should be there. Key growth segment areas are medical devices, as I mentioned, hospital services, pathology services. Telemedicine is another area which is definitely bound to grow, in spite of some of the good old clinicians will say that, will talk against about telemedicine, and rightly so. The patient wants his hand to be touched by the doctor. I think we should not give that up. Although telemedicine has to grow, but the patient has to be touched by the doctor. So I think the initial start of telemedicine will be for specialists to help doctors rather than doctors to help paramedics. So, more so will be on specialists helping, but both have to grow. Medical tourism is happening in India. I do not know whether we need it or we don't need it, but it is happening, and it is inevitable. But again, it makes me feel proud that what our generation has clearly contributed for medical healthcare in this country is that no one has to go out of this country for any treatment. It is available, albeit for a small percentage, but it is available, and the reverse is happening in our country. We need to scale it up. So opportunity, again, is for the healthcare industry, for the device manufacturer, for the investor, and for the inventors. So we took the opportunity from the inventor's point of view and tried to develop something at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. We started a small innovation program, which is called the Biodesign Program, or the Stanford India Biodesign Program, wherein, and I urge the population at large that the engineers have to engage into medicine. The engineers have got some of the brightest minds in the country, and they have to start a movement, Engineers for Medicine. So that has to happen, and there has to be no ego. So this program was really created in such a way that we decided to have doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs. They form a team, and this team is sent to Stanford. It's a fellowship program. We started in 2008, and we completed about 3 batches of this fellowship. And they're sent to Stanford. They learn the inventing process. They see the industry milieu there. They come up, they see the unfettered sort of lateral thinking that is happening there. Then they come back to All India Institute. Now, this is a team of engineers, one doctor, and entrepreneurs, and also business people. They come back to All India Institute after spending 6 months there. They spend 2 months in clinical immersion. They go to the hospitals in different departments or an area which is chosen, and they talk to the ward boys, the sisters, the nurses, the residents, and just keep the eyes and ears open and observe and come up with about 300 to 400 ideas or needs. That if this was this way, the doctor will say, oh, if this was slightly more like this, I would benefit more. So, they make copious notes and come up with about 400 ideas. Now, those 400 ideas or needs are then filtered by various processes, and I'll talk about that. So the mission of this program, as I mentioned, is to develop leaders in biomedical technology innovation, to identify common man solutions, and inexpensive solutions which could be targeted to the larger population at risk. So this is the process of biodesign, which I was just talking to a while back. So they are just observing, coming up with needs, and then these needs are identified, and filtering and specifications are done depending on the disease state, the market size, and also the competitive environment and the competitive devices that are available, whether it be the Western ones, whether it be novel ones which will be competing with the solution. And then they invent and come up with concepts and certain prototypes. And after the inventing said, they come up with a concept which they select, and then they go on to the development strategy, then the early prototyping, early bench testing, early animal testing, and the first-in-man studies ultimately to be either licensed out or to set up their own startup company for getting these medical devices to the common man. Just give you, the example of these students, as you can look at that, industrial designer, product designer, plastics engineer, cardiologist, electronics engineer, material scientist, product designer again, and biomedical engineer, and a physician. So these are how we form the kind of teams and work on. And what is the current status is that 8 different products have been developed at different stages of development, whether it be some early benchtop, early first in man, early animal testing, and these are I'll just give you a flavor of these devices briefly after that. We have trained 13 fellows and 19 interns, and first project, or the first product that has been developed, is a novel made to manage fecal incontinence in non-ambulatory patients. It's something like, for physicians in a layman's term, would be like a fecal follies, which had large implications for patients who are just immobile. It's developed, it's made out of stainless steel. It's, as you can see in this figure, it's loaded in this small peel-away sheath in the lower diagram, if you can look at, and it is inserted. It can be done at home or by the nurse or by the patient close relative, and then it opens up in the blue-colored thing. It opens up at the dentate line on the rectum, and it's connected to a stool collection system. We've tested more than 50 prototypes of this have been developed. We have done the first in man study with this endoscopically, evaluated it, and more detailed clinical studies are ongoing for this product. The second product is a simple one. Now these are patients, we're talking about patients who are suddenly in shock. We are not able to find, maybe a road traffic accident, maybe a cardiac arrest, or hypovolemic shock for some reason. We're not able to find a venous access. And in these patients, it has been recommended by the American Heart Association that fluid could be given into the bone, long bones itself, particularly the tibia, the upper end of the tibia, can be used to give fluids for up to 12 to 24 hours. And many of these devices that are available at the moment are electrical drill, and they're very expensive. So the concept that was developed is a small handheld sort of a device, and I will just show you a small, if I can run this. Yeah, I can run this. It's probably not running. Anyway, we have tested this device in cadavers, and we've been able to insert the needle into the bone. It's a small drill sort of a device. Takes about 5 seconds to insert, and then the needle is connected, and we injected contrast, and we could see the big veins of the leg filling up. And this is a standard method of treatment. This is undergone cadaveric testing and in our Department of Anatomy, and we've got help from them. And and once we've submitted the results to the ethics committee for the first clinical trial to be done, or first in man to be done in the emergency room. We have developed a disposable sheet for transporting patients, which is it could replace the hospital sheets. It's a low cost. It has a very smooth surface underneath, and it can be used just to slide the patients from the stretcher, from the operation table to the trolley, and also from the trolley to the bed. Then a better way to temporarily immobilize lower limbs, and these are kind of disposable splints, which could be in ambulances, which could be in trauma centers, and these are just disposable, costing about 40 to 50 rupees each, and made out of very special cardboard with certain plastics coating, which gives it sturdity, as well as the ability that it does not absorb any blood or sweat, and these have been developed again. And that the first trial has been done at the trauma center, and we will now be putting them in the CATS ambulances ultimately and the MRI ambulances to do a larger scale study. The next project is, as mentioned by the Honorable Chairperson, was the device to deliver cardiopulmonary resuscitation. As you can see in this graph, that cardiopulmonary resuscitation becomes ineffective manual after 1 minute, because the physician gets tired, you have to change the person doing the cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and it is not a very effective resuscitation after 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. So there is a cardiopulmonary resuscitation device which we have, a prototype has been developed, and we presented this prototype to the Wellcome Trust at London, and we have got funding to further develop it, and it is being developed by some of the engineers at Bangalore with a collaboration with us, and some know-how from IIT Delhi as well. So this device should be available for human testing end of next year. An easier way to neonate for screening are neonates with hearing defects and in a rural setting. And this is important because 4 out of every 1,000 child is born with hearing loss, profound hearing loss, and we have over 500,000 hearing impaired in India alone. And to detect them early is the device which is being developed by one of our recent batch, the last year's batch. And this device will be in a position to rehabilitate, once detection is done earlier, the rehabilitation for these people could be done. A better way to dislodge mucus in patients, and this is for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease patients. There is a novel spirometer which is based on magnets repelling each other. It's a novel idea of the engineers, and based on that, respiratory muscles can be strengthened and vibrations can be given to the chest physiotherapy at home as well as in the ICUs. So this is a short summary of the various projects that have been developed. They're not complicated projects. They're very simple, inexpensive projects. A humble beginning to start with, and most of them have got PCT licensing being done and are in the different phases of clinical testing. So as I mentioned, there are various challenges for healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship. See, the problem is that our healthcare industry is a very nascent stage. The regulations are very archaic. Sales and distribution channels are not very efficient. We have the IP enforcement is lax, and risk capital is a huge big problem. And the risk capital at the moment is purely provided by the government. The government has been acting as the best venture capitalist in this country. We don't have major venture capitalists in the medical device sector at the moment. So the government has stepped in as the first investor to deliver on India's decade of innovation. And I think we should take it as a challenge for the next 10 years and try to develop inexpensive medical devices which may be useful not only to the emerging markets, but to the rest of the world, because everyone is looking at cutting costs for healthcare. So physicians are often the best inventors, and for the common man, let us observe and collaborate and innovate. Thank you very much.
May I request to please take your place on the dais? I think one more speaker has been added to this session, which will be introduced by the
Friends, we have amongst us a pioneer in the field of nanosciences, and I have the privilege to introduce Dr. Shanti Kumar Nair. Dr. Shanti Nair is Dean of Research, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, and Director, Amrita Center for Nanosciences, Kochi, Kerala. He is BTech from IIT Mumbai and has done his MS PhD from Columbia University, New York, USA. He worked as a professor in University of Massachusetts, USA for 20 years. He had joined Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham in 2006 to head the center. He received Presidential Award from Government of USA for Research in Composites. So please grace the dais and enlighten us.
I know I'm giving this talk at very short notice. I wasn't really part of the schedule, and I want to especially thank All India Institute of Medical Sciences organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I wasn't here for the first talk where there was some discussion about nanotechnology in health. I'll just take a short time, maybe 10 minutes with the chair's permission, to say a few words about nanomedicine and regenerative medicine using nanotechnology, and what are some of the things that can be done, what are some of the few things that we have done, where is the potential. Hopefully I can try to summarize and give a little picture of what the potentials are. We are based at Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, which is a combination of a hospital and a research center. And the research center is a combination of the technology component and the basic medical sciences. So that helps us really take some of these technologies and translate them. I want to talk a little bit about the advantages of nanomedicines, and I hope I'm not repeating what the first speaker said. One is the potential to deliver the medicine directly to the target site. Now that means far less collateral damage. Secondly, and this is a very important thing which we have recently focused on, is that you can simultaneously deliver multiple drugs. Now, why would you want to do that? In diseases such as cancer, this can be an extremely important thing. For example, use of multiple small molecules to inhibit different activities in the cells or different pathways in the cells. The ability to do that is really only possible using this technology efficiently. The third is increased bioavailability. That means that medicines can be uptaken into the cells in a very, very efficient way. This usually does not happen as efficiently when the drugs are provided alone. So that is, again, a tremendous advantage. Now, the fourth one is it's less toxic because you're going to use much less doses. If you're going to have high bioavailability, direct delivery to the target size, that means you don't need as much dose. So the toxicity is less. The other part of toxicity also which needs to be considered is that the toxicity is preferential. That means you want the toxicity only to the disease cells and not to the normal cells. And that is also possible using nanomedicines. And the last one is sustained release over long periods. Now, sustained release over long periods is a tremendous advantage because that means less frequent administration of the medicines. Now, all of these is not an automatic given. There's a lot of work and a lot of design, a lot of surface biofunctionalization that has to be done to enable us to take advantage of all these, what I have listed there on the screen. So maybe I can give you a couple of examples. The second part is advantages in regenerative medicine. That is, we are trying to regenerate tissues. We are trying to provide cell therapy to regenerate damaged tissues. And in all of that, again, nanomaterials have a tremendous advantage because they provide a controlled cellular environment. And that controlled cellular environment is nanostructured in the same way that the natural extracellular matrix is nanostructured, and therefore it is possible to provide a special environment that can improve the regenerative efficacy of tissues and cells. Dr. Balram Bhargava talked about, well, he didn't, but I think he has done a lot of work on stents. Again, an example is nano-patterning of surfaces. Providing nanostructures on surfaces can tremendously improve the efficacy, durability, tissue integration of implants. I'll just show you an example here. This is a metallic implant with different nanostructures on there. And if you look at an animal model, you will see, does this work? Yeah. you'll see that special nanostructures give no fibrous tissue around the implant. And whereas without the presence of those nanostructures, you get a lot of fibrous tissue. So you can actually control the durability, the integration of implants very well by patterning the implants. And as I mentioned here, they can provide a natural ECM environment, and they can also be a co-environment for the presence of growth factors, which can be simultaneously delivered along with the cells. So these are two areas in regenerative medicine and nanomedicine where nanotechnology can provide significant value addition, and that is really where I think the advantages come in. I'll give you just some examples of just a few things that illustrate what I'm trying to say. We have been working on nano clusters as one example. Again, I want to say it's only one example. Polymeric materials, organic materials, inorganic materials are all materials that we have studied. Our focus has been on non-toxic materials so that we don't create additional problems trying to develop these medicines. And one of the special clusters that we have developed is gold clusters. So you have these 25 atom gold clusters that are enveloped in protein. It could be human protein, it could be BSA. And you have an overall envelope that's about 10 nanometers in size. The individual clusters are about 1 nanometer in size. And the role of such a cluster is that at these small sizes, it gives you luminescence, and so you can track and diagnose diseases. And the protein environment is an excellent carrier for drugs. And you can see that the sizes are shown there, about 10 nanometers, and it glows in the IR regime, and therefore it can be used for IR-based tracking and targeting of cells and diagnostic purposes. Now, here we have shown how gold clusters very nicely target cancer cells and are absorbed into cancer cells. And so you get this targeting of cancer cells and absorption into cancer cells. And given the limitation of time and the fact that I'm not supposed to be a part of this schedule, I'll just give you a couple of examples. One is where we have used the gold cluster as a way to detect leukemia. That is, we've used it to functionalize it. We have CD33 conjugated the cluster. And you can see that you have very special uptake into leukemia cells. And so even in blood cancers, it can be used to detect it, and we can do it by FACS, and we can do it by luminescence. And so it is one application of how this targeting using the CD33 conjugated clusters, you can use it for diagnostic purposes because of the presence of gold nanoparticles which provide the NIR contrast. The other example I want to give is the design of a material containing multiple drugs and how they can actually be practically put to use in a very efficient way. So the construct that we have is a nanomaterial which has targeting ligands. Inside the material, you have some imaging agents. It could be gold clusters. And you have chemo drugs in there or multiple drugs in there. And then they're used to target the material. Now, we have used the protein matrix with gold clusters. And we have used different chemo drug molecules, and the carrier is basically a protein, and we're targeting ligands. And one of the constructs that we have looked at, and essentially we are trying to target different pathways in cancer, multiple signaling pathways in cancer. and using small molecule inhibitors as a way to deliver multiple small molecule inhibitors in a single carrier. And we have actually done the computational work, which I'll skip through because we don't have the time. But I'll come to the final cluster that we have designed and actually processed in the lab. So you have essentially one cluster which is, I keep pressing the wrong button, which contains a small molecule drug 1, and a second cluster which contains a small molecule drug 2. And then we combine the two in a co-shell format. So the inside you have drug 2 and the outside you have drug 1. All of them are encapsulated in the protein. So now, how do they work simultaneously? This is the actual, what it actually looks like with just part A with one drug, it's 45 nanometers. When we put both drugs together, it's 158 nanometers. So it's still very much in the nanoscale regime where we can use to target the cells, cancer cells. And if you look at the unconjugated version, you will find that the cells are not, and these are pancreatic cancer cells, and there's not much uptake. But when you look at the one that is conjugated on the surface with an appropriate targeting agent, you get an enormous increase in contrast inside the cells, showing that there is a lot of conjugation. And we can also use it to target stem cells. These are mesenchymal stem cells, and you can see from the glowing image that they can be specially targeted and tracked. Now, the two types of small molecule inhibitors we use, one is really one to inhibit the migratory capacity, and so that is what is shown here in a cartoon. And when you use that small molecule inhibitor inside the cancer cell, you find in the bottom one with the small molecule inhibitor inside the protein nanoconstruct, you don't get the migration in a scratch test. So that is one example. But more interestingly, if you look at this result, this is only with drug 1, that is this drug, and this is with the second drug. You find one inhibits migration, one is metabolic signaling. Individually, they don't give a very significant effect. You have to go to substantially high concentrations. But if you now combine them, as shown here in this construct, you will see that the cancer cell viability is decreased substantially after very low concentration. In fact, after 48 hours, you get essentially complete cell killing. And so this kind of approach, where combinatorial approach is something that we have developed and which has tremendous potential and application in diseases such as cancer. So because I was not really intended to be here to give a rather elaborate talk, I'm going to end here and say that the concept of nanomedicine, the concept of drugs per se, is going to be revolutionized with the introduction of nanomedicines for the reason that I had spoke of earlier. Less toxicity, better delivery, more targeting, lower dosages, and much, much higher efficacy. If we design these materials in the proper way, functionalize these materials in the proper way, the closing remark that I want to make is that we have to pay very close attention to the toxicological characteristics or the toxicity of these materials inside the body. And so we have actually set up a toxicology evaluation lab with virtually 60, 100 protocols where we look at the entire hematological toxicity, organ toxicity, genotoxicity. Without all of these having been established, we cannot, of course, introduce these materials into the human body, but the potential is very high. Thank you.
variety of subjects which will have a far-reaching impact on healthcare delivery in future. Some of them are the crystal ball glazing of the future that holds for us. Some of the technology that will change the entire future healthcare scene. Where spoken, some of the innovations that we have undertaken in the country and that will also have a far-reaching impact on the cost of the care and the affordability of by the people, those who are living below the poverty line. So these topics were discussed. Each speaker gave a very detailed account of his subject. We would request the audience that we, though run out of the time, but I think we can have 10 minutes to spend on the question answer. Yeah. Please be focused on the question so that we can take a larger amount of questions.
My congratulations to Dr. Balram. Very quickly, you had some reservations about the medical tourism. What are they? Number two, the subject is healthcare infrastructure. Obviously, you require very sophisticated laboratories, and I'm glad you are adopting the engineers along with you. So my question is, cardiologists have been instrumental all over the world in advanced countries for setting up medical architecture units, and they have been playing a bigger role in the city planning. How far have you gone in making your contributions stress-free in the city planning areas?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question, and as far as innovations are concerned, we're trying to develop something which is for the country. We are in a state. Initially, the devices that we are trying to develop are class 1, class 2 devices. In terms of making your last point about making stress-free for the society, is that the question? Yeah, I think so. So I think I would laud and congratulate the contribution and innovation made by people like the person who's going to deliver the validatory function. I think, and also Swami Ramdev. I mean, people have started exercising in this country. I think their single contribution has been an innovation for the country, I would say, and make it stress-free. If that addresses your question?
Before we take another question, I think our keynote speaker, General Badhani, has to leave because of the urgent engagements that he has. We must applaud him for the keynote address and as he is leaving for his further assignments. So the next question.
Sir, my question is to Dr. Nair.
Yeah.
My question is for Dr. Nair.
Yeah.
Sir, the concept of personalized medicine is very much possible through microarray technology which has come, and then it is replaced by the nano arrays. Sir, if we talk about the Southeast Asia, places like Singapore, the doctors are using nano arrays for the personalized medicine and for better diagnosis.